Hi, this is Susan from Pepper Goose Design. I'm just making this video to help support my beach days make-along for those that are a little bit less experienced perhaps, or have never come across filet crochet before. I just want to sort of help you figure out what a filet unit is and how to work the first few rows of the swatch so you can get going. Now, filet crochet is really about a pixelated or blocky image, and often the only thing you might have really is a chart, which is either spaces or blocks. And any sort of graph paper or grid paper, you can actually draw in a design for yourself, and there are rules that help you interpret that chart. So my finished swatch that I've done ahead of time is here on the right, obviously, and as you can see between the actual stitch chart and the swatch, the solid areas line up to the solid areas of stitching. And for any open square or space, as I've called it in the pattern on your stitch chart, it corresponds to the open space, which is composed of a vertical stitch and 2 chain to sort of frame out that unit in the grid chart there. Now, anything that's happening here as a space in the beach days garment is a double treble for the height and then 2 chain across the top. So each filet unit is 3 stitches, and if it's a space, it's a double treble and 2 chain. If it's a block over here, then each filet unit is 3 stitches and it is 3 double treble. Now, the conventional rules for filet crochet is not actually to use a double treble, it's to use a treble, a slightly shorter stitch. So in the conventional way, this would actually be a treble and 2 chain, and the block would be 3 treble. But in making the garment, if I make the stitch taller, we can actually complete the garment in fewer rows. So it just makes the whole thing quicker, and that's why I've decided to do it that way. But either way, I've just called it a filet unit, and a filet unit is either a space or a block. That's really all that means. And when we actually mark out our own stitch chart, for the whole garment, you mark out a certain number of filet units across and a certain number of filet unit rows down to make your back piece and front piece. So let's start making our swatch. So I've really sort of stepped you through the first couple of rows to get you started. So let's get rid of this for now. Now I've got this lovely kiwi green Wurlette. Hopefully shows up well enough for the contrast. And the first bit of our instructions on page 8 of the pattern, it's talking about chaining 62. Now the 62 chain have come about because you've got 3 stitches per filet unit. We know we've got 19 filet units across in this particular chart. So there's 19 times 3 stitches across, plus we need a bookend, a last stitch of the row. So it's going to be the number of filet units multiplied by 3, plus 1 is the number of stitches across the bottom in chain. And then we actually need the first stitch height going up. So as I've drawn this little picture here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 chain that is behaving as that first double treble. So ultimately we've got 19 times 3, which is 57, plus the bookend stitch, which is 58, plus 4 to make that first stitch, which is the 62. So I'm just going to count out my 62 now. Just bear with me. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 57, 58, 59, 60, and 61, 62. So I count out in threes or fours just to kind of get all my chain out the way. It helps to, I hate stopping to count, so I just like to make sure I've counted them all out. And so ultimately this is going to be across the bottom and that little first stitch of the row 1. So let's get started with that now. Okay, now because our first 4 chain are behaving as that first stitch, we're going to skip over those. The 5th chain from the hook is the foundation chain at the bottom of that stitch. So we're going to work our first stitch into the 6th chain from the hook. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There's our one we're going for. I've just pinched off next to it. And so the instructions say 1 double treble into 6th chain from hook, because the skip chain count as that first stitch in the foundation chain. So 1 double treble in next chain. So yarn over twice, insert hook into the chain, and I'd always try and keep 2 loops on top and 1 loop below when working into the foundation chain. So we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 a few times to complete our double treble. Now, it looks a bit weird, doesn't matter, we're going to just keep going, that will sit better later. And so now we've got 1, 2 stitches of our 3 we need for the first filet unit, which is a block. So we're going to complete another double treble into the following chain. So we'll just do that. And there is our first filet unit completed as a block. So if we have a quick look at the chart, the next one, or the next 2 are spaces. So we're going to want to work a double treble, chain 2, double treble, chain 2. So another double treble into the next chain. Now working into the foundation chain is always a little bit tricky. It's a bit fiddly until you get going. So you just sort of have to wait that out. So we've got a double treble and 2 chain, so we can go again. Now, basically, because it's a space, we're going to skip over those 2 chain and go into the 3rd chain at the bottom. And that matches the 2 chain at the top of the space. Okay, so now we have 1 block and 2 spaces. So our next bit on the chart says we've got 3 blocks, and since each block is going to be made up of 3 double treble, we're going to do 9 double treble to complete those. So that's all across the bottom. So again, we go 1 to the 3rd chain across the bottom because we've just done a space for the unit before. I'm having a little bit of trouble because it's actually really hot today, and despite my air conditioning being on, it is pretty sticky. But anyway, we shall push on. It says block 1. And I often find to insert your hook into the foundation chain, I'm kind of pushing down into the left to try and get it in there. If you try to just go straight on, it's pretty difficult. But if you sort of go down to the left, it helps you get through with the 2 loops on top and the 1 loop on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 2 more. Temperature is not helping me, but anyway. Let's have a look, see. So now we've got 3, 3, and 3. So there are our 3 blocks done. So now we've got to this point on the chart. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces to work across. So we're going to begin with the double treble in the next stitch, of course, and then chain 2. So I'll do that a few times across. At least you can speed up a bit here. 1, 2, and 3. And it's important to keep that foundation chain facing the same way all the way across, and not letting it twist, or you'll get lost and your stitch count won't match up. Now I tend to work with the front face of the chain facing me, but you could equally work on the rear side with the rear bumps facing you. It's just as long as you go under the 2 loops. I just find it always easier to go into the front face and push down to the left just to get in there. Oops. Okay. So now we have the 1 block, 2 spaces, 3 blocks, 8 spaces, 2 blocks, 1 space and 2 blocks. And now we've just got the 1 stitch left to work, which is the bookend stitch. This one's always a bit fiddly, I find, when you have to go in next to that very beginning starting loop. Okay, so there's our bookend completed. Now, just a bit more yarn. Now ultimately we're over here and we want to make 4 chain to turn and then come back the other way. So we're going to go 4 chain and then 2 double treble for that first block, because the 4 chain acts as the first double treble, and work our way back. So I'll just start with that and then zip through to and pick you up again at the end. Now I'm just in the habit of working my turning chain before I turn. It's just what I do, doesn't really matter. But because we're this one acts as that first double treble, we're not going into there, we're actually going to this space, or this double treble I should say. And then the third stitch completes the first filet unit as a block, like so. So I shall continue on and pick you up at the other end of the row, just so I can show you how to work into the top turning chain, so you can zoom in there. Okay, so we've got almost to the end of the second row here. So to make it match the chart there, we've got a very beginning square there, we've gone across, we've come back. Now we're actually about to complete this third block. I've done 2 there. Just want to point out at this stage though that when working the spaces back, it's easy to find where to work your next double treble because you're really just lining up all the posts. So that makes it pretty simple. When you are working a space above a block though, if you hopefully zoom in there, you can see, we've got the double treble and then you're going to count to missed double treble of the block below. So you still line up all the beginning stitches of each filet unit to make that grid. Now I'm just going to work the third block here, so working a block above a space, and with that you can work into the chain itself, but I prefer to work into the chain 2 space. So I've got my first double treble lined up with the first filet unit of the space below. Sorry, with the first double treble of the space below. Okay, so now with the 2 double treble, if you're going to work it into the chain, it's valid, it's fine. You can do that. It's just a lot more fiddly, and over the whole garment, it's quite a lot slower than working into the chain space. And I've always worked the chain space, just taking care with that first or lowest segment that it's not too loose around the chain. So that's kind of how I would complete that first double treble, if you like. And just to demonstrate what I'm trying to avoid, if we make the first segment and you pull up and then work the rest of your stitch, you'll end up with a much taller stitch, but also it will kind of flop around the chain. So trying to avoid that and just keep the segments even anyway, but just trying to pull up too much when, you know, working with that golden loop aspect for a firmer stitch. And even there between the two, you can see there's a little bit of a difference, so I might just go back so they sit nice and flat. Okay. And there we go, block complete. So now I've got 2 spaces to finish the row. So there's our 2 spaces, and now we want our bookend stitch to finish off the row. So just trying to zoom in so we can see clearly, hopefully. Like counting the other stitches, we've got a double treble, and then the next is the top chain. And you want to insert your hook under 2 loops when we make that stitch. So we're going to yarn over and insert hook, 2 loops, draw through 2, draw through 2, draw through 2, and it comes out quite nice and a smooth, flat edge. Just want to make sure you can see that. And the reason we go under 2 loops, I will now do it in under 1 loop so you can see how much it distorts. So if I work just under the first loop I can find and work the stitch, again, we've created this sort of gapey thing going on there, which is what I'm trying to avoid. So when working that last bookend stitch into the top turning chain, or the last double treble of the row, just make sure you find the 2 loops, and then it will sit nice and firm and straight. And that was the, you know, that was the bunch of chain that looked a bit weird at the beginning of the last row, but now it's sitting nice and pretty well straight. So now when we turn, over here, we're up here, so we're going to make a space at the beginning of our row, which means we've got to make 4 chain for the height, 2, 3, and 4. And because it's a space, we want to make 2 chains. So there's chain 6 is what you've really done, is turning chain. And then the next double treble aligns with the post. So now we're on to a block. So again, we're working into the chain space. And off we go. So hopefully that has helped you just get started. It's really just continuing using the same principles along the rest of your swatch, and when you're interpreting the chart in the pattern as well. It's just a block is 3 double treble, a space is 1 double treble and 2 chain, and the first stitch of every feeler unit lines up much like the lines on graph paper. And at the end of the row, you need a bookend stitch just to square it out. And that bookend stitch is worked into the top turning chain, because those 4 chain are acting as your first double treble of the row. And that's really about it. It's just applying those principles, make the swatch. My CT number 5 on my blog and CT number 8, the dreaded swatch on my blog, tells you how to block the swatch. And then I've uploaded a video to the international and Dutch groups, the Shapers Facebook groups, that is, to show how to actually measure the gauge in the centre. So if we have this is the swatch, you generally want to measure it in the middle of your swatch. That's more important in how many feeler units per 10 centimetres and how many rows per 10 centimetres. That's what you want to measure, as opposed to the whole size. As you can see by just my sample. I mean, I can block it perfectly square, but it's going to soften over time to actually show. You can see wobbly edges here because this area has more chains in it, and they will inherently take up less space and be a bit tighter with less stretch than areas where you've got a lot of double treble in a row. And so you do get this sort of wobbly nature to it. So measuring the whole size of the swatch is a little bit misleading. Ultimately, you want to encourage it to lie like it's going to be on your body. So gravity is going to pull it this way when you wear it. So you want it to be stretched how you're going to wear it, and then measure across the middle to check your gauge. And the gauge across, the stitch gauge or number of filet units per 10 centimetres across, is your most important measurement because that represents the garment going around your bust and the amount of ease you have around the bust. So that is the most important one to try and match. If you're within half of a filet unit or bang on, perfect, great, go and start the project. If you're out by more than that, like if you're out a whole unit per 10 centimetres, by the time you've done your, it's hanging on my body and then take your measure, then you probably want to re-swatch in a bigger or smaller hook, depending on which way you are. Do you know if your stitch gauge is too loose or too tight? So if you end up with fewer, so if we just look at the part down here, if we end up with fewer filet units across than you want, then each one of those has to be bigger than it should, so therefore you need a smaller hook. If you end up with more filet units across than you should, then each one of those is smaller to fit into the same space, so therefore you want the next size up hook and try again. I've also got Stitch Anatomy 1, Stitch Anatomy 2 and Stitch Anatomy 3 on my blog to help you finesse your hooking technique and fiddle around with gauge as well. Okay, that's it. Good luck.